All right, so today I wanted to start by talking about a study published by Newsweek, and it came out a couple days ago, and it's titled Lockdowns May Have No Clear Benefit versus Other Voluntary Measures, International Study Shows. And as we get into it here, a study evaluating, responses around the world found that mandatory lockdown orders early in the pandemic may not provide significantly more benefits to slow the spread of disease than other voluntary measures such as social distancing or travel reduction. The peer-reviewed study was established in the European Journal of Clinical Investigation on January 5th and analyzed case growth in 10 countries in early 2020. The study compared cases in England, France, Germany, Iran, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, and the US, all countries that implemented mandatory lockdown orders and business closures, to South Korea and Sweden, which instituted less severe voluntary responses. It aimed to analyze the effect that less restrictive or more restrictive measures had on changing individual behavior and curbing the transmission of the virus. The researchers used a mathematical model to compare countries that did not enact more restrictive lockdown orders and determined there was no clear significant beneficial effect of more restrictive measures on case growth in any country. And, I find it very very good that they say in any country, not they found it in some. We do not question the role of all public health interventions or of coordinated communications about the epidemic. Again, I think they're throwing that in there because they don't want to be accused of being a denier, right? The worst thing in the world. But anyway, but we fail to find any additional benefit of stay at home orders and business closures, the research said. However, the researchers also acknowledged that the study had limitations and noted that, again, this is such a stupid point, but anyway, that cross-country comparisons are difficult since nations may have different rules, cultures, and relationships between their government and citizenry. Now, point needs to be made here. It doesn't matter if it had quote unquote limitations, because again, if you want to force people to stay at home, if you want to shut down their business, that is a very extraordinary claim, right? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. You don't get to say, oh, I don't think they're saying this, but oh, you can't compare country to country, even though they're perfectly fine comparing us to Australia, which is objectively much different than comparing Canada to Sweden, right? Canada has a lot more in common than Sweden than we do with Australia. And number one, they're in a different hemisphere. Number two, they are an island nation, and number three, they're more rural, right? So there's three things right off the top of my head right there. Um, the study was conducted by researchers affiliated with Stanford University and was co-authored by Jay Bhattacharya, professor of medicine and economics, who has been a vocal opponent of the lockdown since March. I'm not going to read the rest of it here; it's kind of pointless. But again, the other important thing I noticed while reading this too is that do you notice how the lockdown zealots never bring up the Asian countries anymore, aside from maybe China? But again, anyone with half a brain knows their numbers aren't accurate. Like, do you notice how they never bring up Japan and South Korea anymore? Well, it's very obvious because Japan and South Korea never had mandatory masks. They never had mandatory shutdowns. Everything was entirely recommendations, right? It's very funny that, um, they literally can only think of two examples out of, like I always bring up, you have what, a dozen provinces, you have 50 states, and you have probably 100 other countries that you could use. And of those, pushing 200 examples, you can only think up two to back up your point. Like, you can only think up two, seriously? Off the top of my head, I can point out South Dakota, Florida, Sweden, South Korea, Japan, all of these areas. And then on the reverse, you have all of these European countries. I mean, you can add Slovenia to these ones that implemented lockdowns and they didn't work. You can throw in the GTA, you can throw in California, you can throw in New York, you can throw in New Jersey, you can throw in Massachusetts. Again, I can go on, right? And the other thing too is that when it comes to these people, it's just a confession they really have no idea what they're talking about. Because again, these are the same people that said, like I brought up, that South Korea and Japan are examples of the lockdowns working. But again, South Korea and Japan never had, maybe up to recently, but off the start, they never had mandatory mask mandates. They never had mandatory shutdowns. It was always recommendations. So if they can get through it with recommendations, why can't we? And this is the most frustrating aspect of this too, is that a lot of these, some of them do, in fact a lot of them do, but I know a lot of people that support lockdowns, or even maybe tacitly support lockdowns, that it doesn't even benefit them. Like it's one thing if you're some public servant who's getting paid to work from home or not even having to work at all right now. It's one thing to support a lockdown in those situations. It's an entirely different situation for people I know. You know, one of them runs a business that's very, very close to getting put out of business because the lockdowns, and yet they're not fully supportive of the lockdowns, but they're definitely not against them. It's like, my God, like it just boggles my mind how so many people can have that worldview, especially so far into this too. Like right now, you know, as a society, we have such a plague of a lack of critical thinking skills. It's not even funny. Because if we are a year into this almost, if we've had multiple lockdowns, we've had mask mandates for what, 4 or 5 months now, and it clearly has no effect on the spread, then why are we still doing it? And not to mention we have way more examples of places that aren't doing lockdowns that are doing just fine than we do the other way around, right? The only examples that these people can come up with are island nations that are in a different hemisphere, that are throwing people in jail, or at least at the time, they threw people in jail if they got caught outside without the government's permission. They were throwing people in jail for making social media posts questioning the lockdowns. Is that seriously what these people are proposing? These are the same people that are they're so worried about fascism, but yet they want Jason Kenney and the UCP to be able to throw people in jail for making social media posts questioning the narrative. Like, how stupid can you possibly be? Now, the reason why they support is that they genuinely think that um, it's just people that agree with them that are going to be making these decisions, which is the reason why the left supports all these authoritarian measures, right? It's that they think that it's going to benefit them, but what they don't realize is that, you know, it always comes back on you, right? It always comes back on you. Um, so anyway, I wanted to bring this up because it's a very important point too, and not to mention too, this is a peer-reviewed study too. This is one of the other many things I can't stand about a lot of these people, is that they constantly bring up, whenever you give them clear evidence, they say, oh, you know, I want peer-reviewed studies, and you give them peer-reviewed studies and they just ignore you. Like, I've talked to multiple people over the last week that um, have said that, and I post stuff like this and never get a response, just never get a response. It's just that the craziness of these people is off the charts. So the next thing I wanted to bring up here is from Brett Sears, saying there are still 0 people hospitalized with you know what in New Brunswick. It seems that not all of these cases have the you know what illness, rather than just tested positive for the virus with a high PCR test by contact tracing healthy people. Why is it never reported how many people are sick? Now, again, this is a point I've been bringing up for a long time, even going back to when was it, like quite a while ago. I think it was maybe even over the summer when Nova Scotia increased their restrictions as well, and they had 1 person in the hospital. You know, again, these aren't big provinces, but these provinces have to have capacity to get at least 100 people in an ICU, and they have no one, right? They have no one. Um, so again, this is just more evidence that this isn't about a virus. This isn't about saving lives. This is entirely power hungry people uh, dictating what we do with our lives. And not to mention too, I think a lot of these people are also people that are just blindly taking orders, right? Like a lot of the mid-level government people, they're just people that are just blindly taking orders. A lot of these people may be dependent upon their job, and they don't want to lose their job, so they're just going to blindly take these orders, right? Um, so I understand where those people are coming from, but I still think that what they're doing is very wrong. But again, the point remains here that this isn't about a virus, right? This isn't about a virus. This isn't about saving lives. If this was about saving lives, they would be reopened, or at the very least more open than they are. Again, same thing goes for every other province, right? What I just brought up too, the data does not show lockdowns works. It's shown that since April, if not, May, maybe, if you want to make that point, right? Um, and it's so frustrating to have to constantly bring this stuff up over and over again, and have the quote unquote experts clearly ignore this stuff. And again, this is one of the other many lies of this whole situation that the lockdown zealots bring up is, oh, all the experts support lockdowns. Well, no, that's not true. There's thousands of experts that signed the Great Barrington Declaration. There's um, tons of doctors that I see on a daily basis that are questioning this stuff. And not to mention, too, there's a lot more that one of them I personally who is against this stuff, or a close family member knows them personally. I used to know them kind of, um, who is against this stuff as well. But yet they don't say anything because they're afraid of getting fired, or push back and all this kind of. It's the same thing like I brought up with a dentist the other day too. Like, she kind of tacitly brought it up, and then I told her what I really thought, and then she opened up about it, right, too. So not that a dentist is technically an expert on this stuff, but again, the point remains that the thing that the lockdown zealots don't understand is that there's a lot of people who disagree with this stuff but aren't overly vocal about it. The one thing that I have noticed is that the people who are on board with the lockdowns are always very vocal about it. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard one person, right? Not one. There probably is some in the real world, but and for the simple reason that they're people that they live in echo chambers and they genuinely believe that they're all morally righteous and they're saving lives, right? But again, like I say, the main point here is this isn't about a virus. And the next thing here from Spencer Fernando. He says the conservatives need to stop trying to find some perfect poll tested position and take a strong stance against lockdowns, against curfews, and in favor of individual freedom and limited government. They may pay a short term political price, but it's the right thing to do. Again, I have absolutely no idea what the conservatives are thinking on this one. Like, really, really, absolutely no reason, because I think there's many reasons. Number one, because I think there's a lot of people who normally don't vote for them, or at least as of late, and that would be a very good time to win back voters, right? And I think another really important point here too is that at some point, at least probably, um, people are going to look back on this and think, man, we were so stupid for overreacting how much to the degree that we did. And if the conservatives can point to, yeah, we were pointing that out, right? We were pointing that out. It was the liberals that were, well, at least at the federal level, that were the ones that were overreacting to this, right? So if they could do that, I think that would be a very good point. But I think at the end of the day, the conservatives are too far gone, and anybody still holding out hope for them, I really don't know what you're holding out hope for. And the only argument they really have is, oh, we got to get Trudeau out. But I mean, there's two massive problems with that. Number one, we're not worried about Trudeau. We're worried about Trudeau's ideas. If Trudeau gets voted out of office, but someone, or he leaves office, but someone with views comparable to him takes over, we didn't actually get anywhere. Um, and number two, the Conservatives have already lost enough voters that it's almost pointless to even worry about them. And not to mention, too, even if they did get elected, I don't think they would do a whole heck of a lot, and they wouldn't do enough to preserve the conservative cause, right? The only way to preserve a true conservative cause right now is, number one, we got to get the economy back going. Number two, we got to cut immigration a lot. Again, I think those are the biggest things. That, again, if you want conservative governments to have a chance going forward, that's what we need to do. But the conservatives aren't on board with either of those things, right? Like, they're kind of just milk toast, just blindly worthy I'm not Trudeau vote, basically, and that doesn't work. It didn't work last time. It's not going to work this time. So again, like I pointed out too, is that if they wanted to, I mean, at this point, personally, I'm a one issue voter. Like if I don't have a party that's against this garbage, now again, that doesn't mean there's a federal election going on at least right now. But I'm not going to forget the people that supported this and the people that didn't, right? So personally, um, going forward for me, and I would strongly suggest other people, anybody who supported lockdowns, or I would say anybody who wasn't vocally against lockdowns, I wouldn't even consider voting for. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they have next to their name. And for me to consider voting for someone, they had better be vocally against lockdowns. And again, that's regardless of what party affiliation they have. So again, like I say, if the Conservatives really wanted to pick up some ground, I think it would be a good position to take because I don't think the majority of Canadians are for this stuff. And even if you want to argue they are, it's only a matter of time until the majority of people wake up to how much of a fraud this whole situation is. And I think then they would pick up some more votes. But again, I kind of doubt it. And the last thing I wanted to point out here is from Marina Medvin saying, ladies and gentlemen, I present the left, and it's one title saying nonviolence is an important tool for protest, but so is violence. Um, and the next article um, saying it wasn't a sit-in, this was a violent attack, it was a criminal attack. Again, just showing their double standard. And this is the thing too when it comes to the whole protests or riots, whatever you want to call it, from the Trump rally, and what I said and what I would say is that again, if you weren't vocally against Antifa and BLM, then your opinion is meaningless, right? It doesn't matter how bad you think the Trump thing was. I think reality shows that it wasn't as bad as what nearly as bad as Antifa or BLM, but regardless of what, if you think it's worse, then it really doesn't matter because either you're against violence or you're not, right? It doesn't have a political leaning. It doesn't matter how righteous you think your cause is, too. This is the left's main argument is that, oh, it's okay because our cause is righteous. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, um, neither of those causes are righteous either, especially looking back on it, right? George Floyd was a drug overdose. Jacob Blake was clearly justified. So again, like they rioted before they even knew the whole what actually happened, right? It'd be one thing if they waited till the actual outcome and evidence later came out that the guy was killed for no reason. Then maybe you could understand where these people are coming from, but they rioted before they even knew any of the details, right? So again, that is the left for you in a nutshell. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. Again, very important considering how much censorship is going on right now. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I very much would appreciate that. But like I say, at the very least, just check out those links and stay tuned for more.